Unlike Tuesday's initial search, which appeared to cover a broad area, Wednesday, Sky4 captured investigators focusing in on a deep hole they dug in the backyard. At one point, an investigator climbed into it, and then a tent was placed directly over it. Authorities put up additional barriers over the other tents as well, seemingly to conceal their work.
Yeah, like my daughter plays back there, my dog, we're back there all the time, so it's kind of like, wow.
The current resident, Amber Duffins, shared her family was made aware of the search, and authorities put them up in a hotel while the search operation was underway. She wasn't aware the home was connected to Noel's case until his mother, Cindy Rodriguez Singh, was captured in India last year and brought back to Texas to face capital murder charges. Duffins says authorities blocked out her windows so she can't see what's going on in the backyard. She was told Wednesday would be the last day in the search operation.
FBI agents stood silently behind yellow police tape as excavators tore through the backyard of a small home on Wisteria Drive in Everman, Texas. Neighbors gathered outside, watching in complete silence, some already fearing they knew what investigators were about to uncover. Then, beneath a section of earth authorities had searched years earlier, investigators discovered human remains. For more than 3 years, 6-year-old Noel Rodriguez-Alvarez had been missing. His mother claimed he was in Mexico. Days later, she fled to India without him. But prosecutors now believe the truth may have been buried much closer to home. According to investigators, Noel stopped appearing at school, stopped attending medical appointments, and eventually disappeared entirely. Yet nobody inside the household reported him missing. Not even after the family suddenly boarded an international flight out of the United States. And what investigators later uncovered about Noel's final months is deeply disturbing. Welcome to Midnight Evidence. If you enjoy real true crime investigations, missing persons cases, and disturbing mysteries, make sure you subscribe to the channel, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from tonight. Now, let us get into it. The quiet neighborhood in Everman, Texas had seen police cars before. But this time, something felt different. Before sunrise, FBI agents sealed off the small home on Wisteria Drive while heavy excavation equipment rolled slowly into the backyard. Neighbors stepped outside in silence, watching investigators move with unusual caution across a property connected to one of the most disturbing missing child cases in recent Texas history. Nobody spoke much. They just watched. Because deep down, many feared investigators already knew what they were looking for. For more than 3 years, 6-year-old Noel Rodriguez-Alvarez had vanished without explanation. His disappearance had generated nationwide headlines, international searches, and endless theories online. But despite years of investigation, no one had ever found Noel. Until now. As excavation crews broke through sections of dirt behind the home, federal investigators stood nearby studying every movement carefully. Reporters crowded the street. Cameras pointed toward the backyard. And across the neighborhood, people waited for answers they had feared for years. Then investigators made a discovery. Human remains had been found behind the house. The announcement sent shockwaves through Everman. For many people following the case, the moment felt horrifying, but not entirely surprising. Because by that point, investigators had already spent years uncovering disturbing details surrounding Noel's disappearance. Details involving lies, sudden international travel, conflicting stories, a missing disabled child no one reported missing, and a backyard authorities had already searched before. But what makes this case especially chilling is how long Noel Rodriguez-Alvarez seemed to disappear without anyone outside the family truly realizing what was happening. Because according to investigators, the little boy slowly vanished from public life long before police were ever called. Medical appointments reportedly stopped. School routines disappeared. People stopped seeing him. And somehow, life inside the household continued as if nothing was wrong. But eventually, relatives began noticing something disturbing. Nobody had seen Noel in months. And when investigators finally started asking questions, the answers only made the case darker. Because according to authorities, Noel's mother claimed he was living safely in Mexico. Then shortly after police began investigating, the family boarded an international flight to India. without Noel. And what investigators would later uncover about the child's final months inside that home would become the center of a chilling murder investigation that still leaves major questions unanswered today. If you enjoy real true crime investigations, missing persons cases, and disturbing mysteries, make sure you subscribe to the channel, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from tonight. Now, let us go back to the beginning. Because to understand how investigators ended up digging beneath that backyard in 2026, you first have to understand who Noel Rodriguez-Alvarez was.
For the first time in over 3 years, authorities are digging up the backyard of an Everman property in connection to the case of Noel Rodriguez-Alvarez. The 6-year-old was last seen alive in 2022, and police were made aware of his disappearance in 2023. He is presumed dead, but his body has never been found. The Everman police chief spoke with reporters, but didn't share a lot.
Not a lot of new information, nothing we can share at this point. It's just the continuation of the ongoing investigation to try to seek justice for Noel.
However,
And how a vulnerable little boy slowly disappeared in silence while almost nobody realized it was happening. Long before his name spread across national headlines, Noel Rodriguez-Alvarez was just a little boy living quietly in Everman, Texas. To neighbors, the family home on Wisteria Drive looked ordinary. Cars came and went. Children played outside. Nothing immediately stood out as unusual. From the outside, it looked like countless other suburban homes across the country. But behind those walls, investigators would later uncover a far more troubling reality. Noel had been born prematurely and suffered from several developmental and physical disabilities. According to investigators and court records, he required consistent care, supervision, and medical attention. He struggled with developmental delays and chronic health issues that made him especially vulnerable. People familiar with Noel later described him as quiet, withdrawn, and heavily dependent on the adults around him. And that vulnerability would eventually become one of the most heartbreaking aspects of the entire case. Because children like Noel rely completely on the people responsible for protecting them. But sometime during 2022, investigators believe something inside the household began to change. At first, the signs were subtle. Noel stopped appearing as often in public. Relatives noticed they had not seen him recently. School-related activity reportedly became inconsistent. Medical appointments began stopping. To outsiders, these details may not have seemed alarming individually. Families go through difficult periods. Appointments get missed. Children become less visible over time. But when investigators later reconstructed Noel's final known months, a disturbing pattern began to emerge. One by one, the systems designed to monitor Noel's well-being appeared to go silent. And according to investigators, the timing of those changes may not have been random, because during this same period, the household itself was changing. Newborn twins had recently entered the family. Responsibilities inside the home increased. Stress reportedly grew. And prosecutors would later suggest Noel's treatment inside the house may have worsened dramatically during this time. Investigators eventually developed concerns that Noel had become isolated from people outside the household. Less visible, less seen, less noticed, and perhaps the most disturbing detail of all, no one reported him missing. Not when relatives stopped seeing him. Not when appointments stopped. Not when he vanished from daily life entirely. Weeks passed, then months, and according to investigators, by late 2022, Noel Rodriguez-Alvarez had effectively disappeared. Yet outside the family home, almost nobody realized it. And while Noel was slowly vanishing from public life, investigators now believe something else may have been happening behind the house on Wisteria Drive. Something that would later become one of the darkest parts of the investigation. Because according to authorities, shortly after Noel disappeared, changes began appearing in the backyard. By the fall of 2022, investigators believe Noel Rodriguez-Alvarez had already vanished from public view. But while almost nobody outside the household realized a child was missing, investigators would later focus on something else happening at the property during that exact same period. The backyard was changing. At first glance, nothing about the home on Wisteria Drive appeared suspicious. The neighborhood remained quiet. Families continued their routines. Cars moved through the streets like any other suburban block in Texas. But according to investigators, sometime after Noel disappeared, construction work began behind the house. A concrete patio area was reportedly added to the backyard. On its own, that detail may not sound unusual. Backyard renovations happen every day. People build patios, sheds, and walkways all the time. But when authorities later reconstructed the timeline, the timing of the project immediately raised serious questions. Because investigators believe the concrete work happened shortly after Noel was last seen alive.
However, he did share that this new search is not because of any new leads or tips. The FBI, Everman Police, the Tarrant County Sheriff's Office, and the Tarrant County Medical Examiner's Office were all at the home on Wisteria Drive. Sky 4 shows the very thorough operation. Multiple tents are set up as FBI agents sift through multiple piles of dirt. It appears to be very methodical.
It's sad. It's very, very sad.
Neighbors remember the first time authorities dug up the property in 2023, specifically removing a concrete slab that was poured after Noel went missing. The 6-year-old boy lived in the shed behind the home with his mother, stepfather, and 6 of his 9 siblings.
And years later, that same section of backyard would become the focus of one of the most disturbing searches in the entire investigation. At the time, though, nobody outside the family understood the significance of it. Life in Everman continued normally. Meanwhile, according to investigators, Noel's visibility continued disappearing completely. Relatives became increasingly concerned. Some later admitted they had started asking quiet questions inside the family. Where was Noel? Why hadn't anyone seen him? Why had medical appointments suddenly stopped? And why did explanations about his whereabouts keep changing? According to investigators, answers from inside the household became inconsistent almost immediately. Different explanations reportedly circulated about where Noel was staying. At times, relatives were allegedly told he was somewhere else. Other times, the explanations became vague. But none of the stories fully made sense. And over time, concern slowly turned into fear. Because by early 2023, some relatives reportedly realized something deeply troubling. No one could confidently say when they had last actually seen Noel Rodriguez-Alvarez. That realization would eventually trigger the moment that changed the entire case. Because in March 2023, after months of growing suspicion, family members finally contacted authorities. And once investigators began asking questions, the story started falling apart almost immediately. If you enjoy real true crime investigations, missing persons cases, and disturbing mysteries, make sure you subscribe to the channel, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from tonight. Because what police would uncover next would transform this from a missing child case into something far darker. In March of 2023, concern inside the family finally reached a breaking point. After months of not seeing Noel Rodriguez-Alvarez, relatives contacted authorities and requested a welfare check. That single phone call would change everything. Until that moment, investigators had no idea a 6-year-old child had seemingly vanished. There had been no missing persons report filed by the household. No urgent public plea. No widespread search effort. Nothing. According to investigators, Noel had disappeared quietly. And if relatives had not spoken up, authorities may never have known anything was wrong. When police began asking questions about Noel's whereabouts, the responses immediately raised suspicion. Investigators say Noel's mother claimed the little boy was living safely in Mexico with his biological father. At first, the explanation temporarily delayed panic. Children sometimes stay with relatives. Families move between countries. Investigators still needed evidence before assuming something criminal had happened. But almost immediately, detectives started uncovering major inconsistencies. According to authorities, Noel's biological father denied the story completely. Investigators then began comparing timelines, interviews, and travel records. And the deeper they looked, the less believable the explanations became. Detectives reportedly discovered there was no clear evidence Noel had ever traveled to Mexico at all. That realization changed the direction of the case immediately. Because if Noel was not in Mexico, then where was he? As investigators intensified the welfare investigation, disturbing details continued surfacing. Authorities learned Noel had reportedly stopped attending appointments months earlier. People outside the household had not seen him in an unusually long time. And according to investigators, nobody inside the home could provide a consistent explanation for his disappearance. Soon, Everman police launched large-scale search operations across the area. Search crews combed through wooded locations and neighborhoods surrounding the home. Volunteers joined efforts to help locate the missing child. Flyers spread across Texas as fear inside the community grew rapidly. Then investigators brought cadaver dogs to the property. And what happened next would permanently change the case. According to reports, the dogs alerted to decomposition scents near parts of the backyard and nearby structures on the property. That discovery immediately escalated the investigation, because now investigators feared they were no longer searching for a missing child alive. They feared Noel Rodriguez-Alvarez might already be dead. But despite extensive searches of the home and property, police still could not find Noel. No body, no clear crime scene, no definitive answers, only growing suspicion. And while investigators in Texas desperately searched for the missing little boy, another shocking development was unfolding behind the scenes.
But authorities didn't find anything in that first search.
It's taken so long. It's taken so long, and they're digging in the same spot that they've already dug in before. So nothing is going to impress me until they find him.
The boy's mom, Cindy Rodriguez-Singh, was captured last year in India and faces capital murder charges. The family fled the country as questions surfaced about her son's disappearance. She was recently ruled incompetent to stand trial and was sent to a state hospital. Neighbors shared if they could speak with Rodriguez-Singh, they'd say,
"Don't hide. Come forth and say what you did with him."
Because according to authorities, the family was preparing to leave the United States. As the investigation intensified in March 2023, pressure around the family home on Wisteria Drive continued building. Police were asking harder questions. Search teams were expanding operations. Cadaver dogs had already alerted investigators near the property. And across Everman, concern surrounding Noel Rodriguez-Alvarez was rapidly growing. But according to authorities, while investigators searched Texas for answers, the family was preparing to leave the country. In the middle of an active missing child investigation, multiple members of the household reportedly boarded an international flight departing from Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport. Their destination was India. But one child was missing from the trip. Noel Rodriguez-Alvarez was not with them. That detail immediately shocked investigators. Because by that point, authorities already suspected the family's explanations about Noel's whereabouts were false. And now, as detectives worked to determine what had happened to the little boy, key individuals connected to the case had suddenly left the United States entirely. For investigators, the timing looked deeply suspicious. News of the international flight spread rapidly. Public concern exploded across social media and national news outlets. People across the country followed the case as new details emerged almost daily. A vulnerable disabled child had vanished. No one inside the household reported him missing. Cadaver dogs alerted near the home. And now the family had left the country without him. The case quickly transformed from a local investigation into a national true crime story. Soon, federal agencies became heavily involved. The FBI joined the investigation as authorities worked alongside international partners to track the family overseas. Prosecutors began building what they increasingly believed was no longer just a missing persons case, but a homicide investigation. Back in Everman, neighbors struggled to process the growing horror surrounding the case. Many later described feeling disturbed by how normal everything had appeared from the outside. The neighborhood itself remained quiet. Children still rode bicycles through nearby streets. Families continued daily routines. Yet behind one house sat a mystery investigators feared was far darker than anyone first imagined. And despite the family leaving the country, authorities still kept returning to the backyard. Because investigators believed the property itself might still hold critical evidence connected to Noel's disappearance. But even after repeated searches, they still could not find him. And over time, one question continued haunting investigators more than any other. If Noel Rodriguez-Alvarez was never in Mexico, and never left with the family, then where had he been all this time? If you enjoy real true crime investigations, missing persons cases, and disturbing mysteries, make sure you subscribe to the channel, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from tonight. Because years after the family fled Texas, investigators would make a discovery that changed the entire case forever. For years, the case of Noel Rodriguez-Alvarez remained suspended between suspicion and uncertainty. Investigators believed the little boy was dead. Prosecutors pursued serious criminal charges. The FBI continued working the case. And yet, one critical piece was still missing: Noel himself. Without physical evidence, the investigation remained haunted by unanswered questions. Detectives had theories. Cadaver dogs had alerted near the property years earlier. Witness statements painted a disturbing picture. But despite everything investigators uncovered, they still could not fully explain what happened inside the home on Wisteria Drive during Noel's final months. Meanwhile, the community of Everman never stopped searching for answers. Volunteers organized vigils. Residents followed every court update closely. People across the country continued discussing the case online, many wondering whether investigators would ever truly uncover the full story. Then in May 2026, everything changed. Federal investigators returned to the property one more time. The search was different. FBI evidence teams once again sealed off the backyard while excavation equipment tore through sections of dirt and concrete behind the house. Neighbors watched silently from across the street as investigators focused intensely on areas connected to earlier cadaver dog alerts. For days, tension built across the neighborhood. Then authorities made the announcement: human remains had been discovered behind the home. The revelation sent shockwaves through Texas and reignited nationwide attention surrounding the case. Although investigators did not immediately publicly confirm the identity of the remains, many feared the search had finally uncovered the answer authorities had dreaded for years. That somewhere behind the quiet suburban home, the truth had been hidden beneath the ground the entire time. And perhaps the most chilling part of all, investigators had searched portions of that same backyard years earlier, meaning the answers may have remained buried there while the investigation unfolded in plain sight. Today, many details surrounding Noel Rodriguez-Alvarez's final days remain unknown publicly. Authorities continue working to determine exactly what happened inside the home and whether additional evidence may still emerge through forensic analysis and future court proceedings. But the case left behind disturbing questions that continue haunting everyone who followed it. How does a vulnerable child disappear for months without anyone outside the family realizing it? How does an entire household leave the country while a little boy remains missing? And how long did the truth remain hidden beneath that backyard before investigators finally uncovered it? For the people of Everman, the story of Noel Rodriguez-Alvarez became more than a criminal investigation. It became a tragedy about silence. A reminder of how vulnerable children can disappear quietly behind closed doors while the outside world sees nothing unusual at all. And even now, as investigators continue searching for final answers, one haunting reality remains impossible to ignore. For years, Noel Rodriguez-Alvarez vanished in silence. And the truth may have been buried just steps away from where he lived the entire time. If you enjoyed this investigation, subscribe to Midnight Evidence for more real true crime cases, disturbing disappearances, and unresolved mysteries. And let us know in the comments, what case should we cover next?